we know to react, there must be an internal communication network. Like if something, there's impending danger, aren't you alerted by people, right? It's the same thing internally. You have your nervous system and your endocrine system that makes sure that everything is within normal in your body. Okay? So here's the organs of your nervous system. There's two groups. The organs that belong to the CNS or central nervous system. That's your brain and your spinal cord. Don't forget, only brain and spinal cord are organs of the CNS. If it's not, if it doesn't say brain or spinal cord, it must be an organ that belongs to your PNS or peripheral nervous system. Okay? So I like that in the true or false, like I say, the brain, spinal cord, and cranial nerves make up your central nervous system. And people will write true just because they see the word cranial. Don't forget, if it doesn't say this or this, it's not part of the CNS. Okay? Let's see how your nervous system uh, maintains homeostasis. This is the way it does it. Okay? So first, it detects any change. That's the sensory function, right? Then you have to figure out what's going on. You analyze. That's the integrate part. And then finally, your nervous system makes you respond. Like you're all wearing, most of you are wearing long sleeves because you're cold. So the nervous system made you respond to the cold. So the nervous system sensed the cold temperature, you analyze it, then you grab a sweater to maintain what? Homeostasis. Always homeostasis. Okay? So as far as the functions of the nervous system is concerned, this one sensory, integrative, and motor, we can also apply those three main functions to a typical neuron. So the main cell or the main functional unit of the nervous system is called a neuron. And I know you're familiar with the shape of a cell like this, right? So what's this part of the cell? Yes, and this one? Cell membrane, and this is that? Yes. And look at the neuron. It just adapts to its function. So instead of this nice shape, it just became like this, right? So you change the shape, and then this one will start start modifying the cell membrane into processes like that. See? So that it can do its job. Okay? So where is the cell membrane of this one? All around. This is all the cell membrane. You understand?
Mhm.
Where's the cytoplasm? All inside. Okay? The nucleus is just found there. So because it looks, there's the each part of the cell looks different, they have names. This part here is called the dendrites. This is the cell body that contains the nucleus and the organelles. And this is the axon. So the sensory, motor, and integrate function can also be applied to a typical neuron. Look, the dendrites are the input part. So this detects any change. So that's the sensory part of a neuron. Then the cell body analyzes that. That's the integrate part. Then finally, the axon will fire an action potential to communicate or relay the message to the next one. This is the output part or the motor part. Okay? So you can apply those three main functions, sensory, integrate, and motor part to a typical neuron. Okay? What organelles do you think will you find in a in a typical neuron? Which one would be dark? You saw under the microscope. Obviously, which will be dark? What part of the neuron which will obviously be dark? The what? Very good. The cell body where the nucleus is, right? Because the nucleus contains the chromosomes, it's dark. And neurons also are always very busy making neurotransmitters. You know what neurotransmitters are, right? These are like a transmitter frequency. For muscle, it is acetylcholine, right? So neurons alert the next cell by secreting or releasing neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemicals, and they are mainly proteins. So you would assume that neurons would have a lot of protein synthesis organelles. What are they? Yes, ribosomes, RER, and then the Golgi body. Yes, very good. Okay. And that's why it's dark. The cell body is dark. You saw that under the microscope. This is really what it does. They will make neurotransmitters, and then the neurotransmitters will pass through the axon, you see. And then you see this, there's bulges right here. This is referred to as terminal end bulbs or synaptic end bulbs. Okay, end bulbs. Right there. And that's where you will find the neurotransmitters stored. So the neurotransmitters are the chemicals that help them communicate with the next one, transmitter. Okay? So we're going to study neurophysiology. How do neurons do their job? But before we look at neurons, you remember they are very fragile because they cannot divide anymore, right? What's absent is the centrioles, they can't divide anymore. So there must be other cells that protect your neurons. Those other cells are called neuroglia. Before we look at the neuroglia, we can identify neurons two ways. One, you classify them according to function. I think this is very obvious, right? A sensory neuron. So I have the little picture right here. Oops. Can you see this little picture right here? Okay. So what do you think? Sensory neuron is the one that detects changes. Will this neuron be found in the CNS or PNS? PNS, right? Because you don't detect the changes immediately in your brain. It must be outside. So sensory and as well as your motor neurons must be PNS neurons, right? The neurons of the CNS are called association neurons or interneurons or internuncial neurons. So they're the ones that connect the dots. They analyze the information. Okay? So if I ask you, give me the function, the functional classification. I'm just wanting you to tell me, is this a sensory neuron, a motor? So if you have problems with sensory neuron, if the sensory neuron gets damaged, what will be your problem? What will be a symptom? You can't feel anything. Very good. If the motor neuron is the problem, what will be your symptom? Yes, very good. Paralysis. Okay? So, don't forget that because some people, they think if this is injured, you will be paralyzed. That's not true. If this is the one, this one, you will be paralyzed. They have specific function. They're very specific. That's why they have their own names. Just like your tissues, right? If one neuron can do both sensory, motor, everything, then you just call it neuron. You understand? Okay? Another way to classify neurons is according to shape or structure. So right here, you always look at the cell body. And if you look at this one, look, there's many processes coming out of it. So you call it multipolar. This is the most abundant type of neuron. Now, let's look at this one. Look at, How many processes come out of the cell body? How many processes come out of the cell body? 1, 2. So, bipolar. Okay? How about over here? How many processes come out? 1. So, unipolar. You understand? You understand how to classify them? Multipolar. Look at many processes, right? Bi, uni. There is another neuron here. This is like a multipolar neuron. But neurons should have the 3 parts, right? The dendrites, the cell body, and the axon. With this type of neuron, you can't really tell which one is the axon. The axon is usually long, just the one very obvious. This one you can't tell. That's why it's called anaxonic neuron. You only find this in the brain. Okay? But one of those processes will function still as an axon. Okay? Now, before we study the function or nervous physiology, we want to understand the neuroglial cells. So in your microscope, remember, we saw the neuron, the dark blue stained neuron, and then there's other dots around it. The small dots around it, that is what you call neuroglia. Don't forget, neuroglia have nothing to do with sensory, motor, interview. They cannot do that. They cannot fire action potentials. They don't respond to anything. Their job is to protect the neurons, to support the neurons. You understand? Okay? And you have many different types of neuroglia. You have neuroglia found in the CNS, and then you also have neuroglia found in the PNS. Okay? So let's look at the neuroglia that we find in your CNS. Here they are, you see. You have your astrocytes, microglia, ependymal cells, and oligodendrocytes. The first is the astrocyte. Let's look at this astrocyte. You only find this in your CNS. Astro for star shaped like this one. Okay? So highlight this blood-brain barrier. Highlight that. That's a very important function of the astrocytes. So look at, this is your brain, and there's your neuron right here, the blue one. That's the neuron. And there's blood vessels. Of course, there's blood vessels in your brain. And you know that what travels in the blood is nutrients. That's how we get nourishment. You follow? Everybody? Oh, is everybody listening or so tired? If you don't want lecture, you can. Are you on your own? You got this?
No.
Okay. Break for 5 minutes.